So growing up in Winnipeg in the 70s was challenging in a lot of ways for me as a dark-skinned girl. I was one of a handful of non-white kids in my school, often the only one in the class that I happened to be in. My father and mother had emigrated from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, where missionaries managed somehow to convert my father to Christianity. And that's an interesting thing, because conversion to Christianity for a lot of people whose way of life was Hinduism, which is what his family and my mother's side of the family practiced for centuries. It doesn't mean giving up your Hindu beliefs, because in Hinduism there's no need to do that, and Jesus was not seen as any different from many of the other incarnations that India is familiar with. So anyway, getting ahead of myself there. So because my father had adopted Christianity, let's put it that way, we started going to a church in our suburb in Winnipeg when I was a very little girl. I remember doing that. But we also went to the temple every now and then. There wasn't a Hindu temple to begin with in the early days, but later on in the 70s, there was a guru, a teacher. The very common thing in India is for wise people to become, sort of get discovered and establish a following and learn from this particular teacher or guru. And this one that my parents found out about, his name was Sai Baba. And this video is in no way trying to advocate for him or his teachings or anything. I just want to explain where I'm coming from. So Sai Baba taught that all religions are one. It didn't matter what name you used when you called on God, Source, Vishnu, Jesus, Allah, whatever name you used, that prayer or intention in these days, we might say, goes to the same place. It makes complete sense. I mean, I'm Sita. If you call me, as my son does, if you call me mom, I'm still the same person. Even if you call me hey lady, I'm still the same person. You can give whatever name to whatever objects, whatever creatures you choose, whatever consciousness you want to be referring to, it's still the same. So anyway, that's what he taught. That's what I grew up believing, and it still makes more sense than anything else in my life, in my experience. So one day in high school in the early 80s, I was standing in a little group of people. It was the lunch hour. I remember this is a story that has never left me, and it just feels like now is the time to share it. So there was a TV up on the wall in the school, in the hall, and it was on the news channel, and a few people had gathered around and were watching. And it had something to do, I mean, this was Cold War days, so the threat of nuclear war was sort of always in the air, and I guess it was once again coming to a head and looking a little scary. And this one girl, whose name I will not mention, but she was standing in front of me. She was a very popular girl, about a year or two ahead of me. She was really, really distraught. And she wasn't speaking to me. She was speaking to somebody beside her, but she was just saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I guess she was obviously some sort of Christian denomination, because she started saying something about, when is Jesus going to come again? And I wish Jesus would come again and save us from this. And up until that point in time, I kept my Sai Baba / Hindu side. Not that he was Hindu, but for me, those were kind of the Indian side, let's say. I kept that very much to myself, very much hidden from society, you could say. Church was okay, temple was private, secret, hidden. Why? Well, the 70s and still even early 80s were still the tail end of colonial thinking. Still, I and my family experienced racism constantly, so I wasn't going to, point out more differences, give people more ammunition to ridicule me, mock me, possibly even be violent with me. So I kept those things to myself. But here I was standing and watching this news report about nuclear threat, and I felt calm because somebody at that time had asked Sai Baba, this guru from India, whether or not we would all die from nuclear war, basically. And he said no. He gave a lengthier answer about what was going to come, which had to do with floods and all kinds of, fires and natural disasters, which today in 2026, we are definitely seeing. I took a breath and I dared expose that side of me to a white-skinned person that I didn't even know very well, really out of compassion and a desire to help her. And I said, maybe he is here already. Because, in India's thinking, it's not like one Christ that we're waiting for. It's enlightened beings who incarnate over and over, and I'll leave it at that. So I wasn't like claiming Jesus came back, but that consciousness, that Christ consciousness was there. And so I offered to her that there was somebody in India named Sai Baba, and that he said we were going to be okay. Oh my gosh. This girl looked back at me. I can just remember the sneer on her face. And her words were something like, he isn't here. If he was here, I would know it. And he certainly, this was the part that stung, he certainly wouldn't be in India. In India. As if, that would be the last place to find a spiritual teacher. Really? I've never heard of anyone saying they're going to England to find themselves, or Canada, or France, or anywhere else. But I've heard a lot of people say they went to India to find themselves. I wish I could have said that in that moment, but I felt so hurt. Wow. I felt deeply hurt the way she said that about the country of my origin. I've never been there. Full disclosure. Thank you, colonialism. It's who I am. And today, it feels like that imbalance in the world that happened because of colonialism, because of being taught the colonizer's version of history, the colonizer's labels for countries, who chose third world and who chose first world, and why, well, I won't even go down that road. But so I've spent the last couple of decades just following my heart, following my guidance through my own spiritual practice, my meditation, my yoga, all of that. And along the way, I came across this book, Asian Faces of Jesus, edited by Sugita Raja, if you happen to be looking for it. And there's just a little intro here on the first page by Kishab Chundersen. He lived from 1838 to 1884. He was one of several Hindu people who studied Christ, studied and wanted to understand and learn more about who this Jesus was that was being pushed on them by the Christian missionaries. And he said, it seems that the Christ that has come to us is an Englishman, with English manners and customs about him, and with the temper and spirit of an Englishman in him. ... Is not Christ's native land nearer to India than England? Are not Jesus and his apostles and immediate followers more akin to Indian nationality than Englishmen? Why should we then travel to a distant country like England in order to gather truths, which are to be found much nearer our own homes? Go to the rising sun in the east, not the setting sun in the west, if you wish to see Christ in the plenitude of his glory. Now, I don't read that to say our way's better than your way. India's better. India's somehow superior. That is not the thinking of the colonized so much as the thinking of the colonizers. I read that because I share that because there's an imbalance in our world right now, and we're all suffering from it because it's not true. There is no third world. You know, sure, if you want to look at industrialization, if you want to look at economy, I don't know. I don't really care about those things that much, but if that's the criteria you're looking at, then maybe you could label some countries as being developed and others being underdeveloped. But isn't it ironic that those countries that are often labeled as underdeveloped are spiritually so far ahead? There was a woman in my church in Winnipeg who asked me once, when the subject of colonialism came up in a Bible study, and she said, could it be that, the English set sail to these other countries and colonized them because they had the technology to do so? As if the technology didn't exist to build boats in countries like China and India. I said, no, of course, I didn't agree with that, but I didn't go into what I'm going to say now, which is, no, I think it's simply that they were not lacking whatever it was within them that the Europeans were lacking, which caused them to go out into the world and try to conquer other countries, other civilizations in order to try and fill that void. Spiritually mature people, I'm not saying every single Indian person is spiritually mature, of course, but generally speaking, the culture, a spiritually more mature culture, does not seek in the outside, in the outer world, that which can only be found inside. That would have been my answer, but I didn't really feel safe enough at that time to even share that, because I'm sure she wouldn't have liked that answer, and maybe some of you don't, and that's okay, because it's 2026, and if I don't start speaking my truth now, I fear I never will. So it's time for us to bring back balance. Those are literally the 3 words that came to me in a meditation over 20 years ago and got me started on this journey. So here we go. I am Indian. I was taught to be ashamed of that. I was taught to feel inferior because of that. I was taught to see my skin color as somehow a sign that I was inferior. I mean, if all of this isn't just screaming lies, 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 then you may be a little brainwashed as well. And we all have to come out of this trance that we're in of believing the colonizers' lies. I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm not here to, I think I've worked through most of the anger, and the shame and the pain and the frustration and all the feelings that come up. Now I just want to bring back balance. Now I just want to be brave enough to speak the truth and say, you lied to us. You colonizers, you missionaries, you lied to all of us. And we're done believing your lies. And I'm here to tell the truth about India, about who I am, about where I come from, about my ancestors, about I don't even want to call it religion because it was the British that labeled it Hinduism. So yeah, my way of life. Let's leave it at that. And I'm going to leave it there for today. I don't blame this girl in high school who sneered at me and insinuated that India would be the last place that she would expect to find probably anything of value, but specifically in that context, it was Jesus' second coming. I don't blame her. She was a product of her times, of the times we were in. But those times are over. And what I couldn't say then, I'm ready to say now. So, I'm Sita, and if this speaks to you at all, I hope to see you again.